Welcome everyone again to the Learning to Birth webinar series, where we interview some of the world's most inspiring and interesting thought leaders on birth and pregnancy. We're getting to the end of the summit series now, and today we have with us a very special guest who will get us all excited, and that is Sheila Kamara, who is a global advocate and trainer for ecstatic birth. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's very exciting. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about how you started down your journey of becoming an advocate for ecstatic birth?
Yeah, sure. So this is very, very personal to me and my journey of having children. When I was pregnant with my first baby, I really had a deep desire to feel what my body was capable of. I was amazed that my body was gestating new life inside of me. It knew just what to do that. And I wanted to feel that in birth too. And I didn't really have a context for it. I didn't have, a mom who had done natural birth or really live in a community that supports that. But I knew that this was a desire I had for myself, and I didn't really know how to create that. So, I did the best I could, which kind of looked like this. And that didn't work for me. It didn't. Unfortunately, that experience ended up being a lot more traumatic than ecstatic, and really set me on a path of, having to reclaim my relationship with my body and my feminine wisdom, because it was really shaken after that experience. And in doing that, when I got pregnant the second time, I was so fierce about my birth prep, so fierce. I studied, I read, I watched, I practiced. Anything that I could do to prepare myself, body, mind, heart, soul, I did. And this time I knew how to put myself in a situation where I had the support to succeed. So I was birthing with a midwife at a birthing center. I had a doula, and that birth was like a reclamation. Like, wow, now I knew that my body could do this. I had the most euphoric experience after birth. I remember family coming to visit me and saying, Sheila, you got like a light shining out from your face, because I was so happy. I was so happy. And then when I got pregnant with my third, I was like, all right, I know that my body can do this, but I'm very curious about this idea that women can actually enjoy labor, right? So, because I knew what it was like to have that like blissful, euphoric feeling after giving birth. But in all the natural childbirth books I had read, there was always one line that said something like, some women experience heightened states of bliss, ecstasy, and even orgasm when they're giving birth. And I wanted to know what that was about. So I started really researching the experience of pleasure in the body, and was amazed to learn how the process of learning how to feel pleasure, expand your pleasure, have open to orgasm, open to multiple orgasms. It was actually very similar to everything I learned about natural birth. And when I say that, I mean like a lot of the tools, the practices, there's a lot of talk about staying really connected to your body, staying connected to sensation. You use breath, you use sound, you use movement. So I thought to myself, okay, this seems to be like, completely in line with everything that I've learned about natural birth. What if I use these tools to prepare for my birth? And it was interesting, because even though I was preparing for pleasure, in that third birth experience, I had very like pokey contractions. So we tried to like walk around, and at some point, my midwife just said, I'm going to leave you two alone in the room. And I didn't want my husband anywhere near me. It was exactly the opposite of how I conceived it. Instead, we put on some music and I started dancing. And that dance was like I was dancing with the contractions. They would come, they would overtake me, and like leave me pulsing on the floor. And it was an experience like I was so deeply connected to my body, and that energy flowing through me. It took me higher than I could have possibly imagined. That was how I birthed my baby. And afterwards, I remember just thinking to myself, I don't understand, like I was preparing for pleasure, and yet I still, like it was beyond anything I could have conceived. Like, why didn't I know? And why doesn't every woman know how good it can be, how amazing the process of labor can be, as well as delivery? So that, that's my journey, and that's what really started me on my mission to share with other women. I've been working with expectant moms for 10 years now, and in the last 4 years, I started working with birth practitioners as well to really bring these tools of pleasure into the birthing room.
It's such an important journey you've been on. I have a lot of affinity with you and your journey, because my journey was, almost parallel to that, going through my first birth and then going, wow, okay, we're going to learn how to do it differently.
Yeah.
And then experiencing that kind of, that deep dive into how can I do this? And then that revelationary kind of ecstatic experience where these whole new functions of your body come to the surface that you didn't even knew existed. So it's really good to be talking about this. So this might be the very first time that mothers and parents listening today might be finding out that, it's a real thing, ecstatic birth, ecstatic labor. And they might be feeling like, wow, can I do that in front of someone else? Because, often there's going to be birth attendants around, midwives, maybe doctors. How do women reclaim the ecstatic experience, the sexual experience of birth, at the same time as balancing that with it being a kind of communal experience, sometimes a medical experience in our culture?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that there's really no right or wrong way to birth. I sincerely believe that the right way for you to birth is the right way for you, right? So that's like a deeply personal experience, and that the choices that you make are unique to you. Nobody's walked in your shoes. Nobody's lived the life that you've lived. Nobody has your unique set of like fears, hopes, dreams, aspirations. So that said, one of the easiest ways to start to understand this is you conceive with your sexual body, and you do that through pleasure. Hopefully, ideally, you're doing that through pleasure. And so you're also birthing with your sexual body. So it's, in our cultures, the idea that, birth is a sexual experience can still feel very edgy for a lot of people, and that's okay. I would say just think about that. And when you really do think about that, it's like, of course I'm birthing with my sexual body, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to feel comfortable with tools of sexuality in the birthing room in front of, a midwife or OB or, your mother-in-law or whoever is there. So you're really going to want to feel into, well, what is your comfort level? And pleasure, there's a wide spectrum when it comes to pleasure. So pleasure, what it does for you is it releases oxytocin flow in your body. And oxytocin is the governing hormone of labor and delivery. So that's what the pharmaceutical industry is trying to replicate with Pitocin. So rather than, get induced or have your labor moved along through these chemical means, which give you none of the benefits of pleasure, the feel-good benefits, start to learn how to use your own body to generate oxytocin. Now, that can be very sexual. It could be, an orgasm, kissing, nipple stimulation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. If that's something that feels like, I don't have the privacy for that, that feels too edgy for me, that's okay, because you can also get oxytocin through cuddling. You can also get oxytocin through gazing into somebody's eyes. You can experience pleasure flow through sounding. Sound is something everyone expects a birthing woman to be making sound, right? But you can learn how to sound in a way that feels really good, really sensual in your body, expands your flow, and helps you tap into that sexual energy in a way that's not so overt, right? And movement is another powerful pleasure tool. A lot of times in natural birth classes, you learn, oh, I have to surrender. Oh, I have to surrender. And that's a very useful tool. And sometimes it's too intense to surrender. You don't want to surrender. So movement, learning how to move with the sensations of your body and let that guide you, can be very powerful and pleasurable. So I just want to say, it's not really about an expectation that you're going to have an orgasm during birth. Some women certainly have that experience, but I never want to set women up to think, oh, my birth has to look or feel a certain way. The main thing is you can use pleasure consciously as a tool for yourself. So if you start to think about, like most women when they're getting married, understand that, hey, this is my day. This is a special day. I can start to think about what do I want to see? What do I want to hear? What do I want to taste? What do I want to wear? How do I want to feel, right? Bring that awareness into your birth too. You're bringing new life into the world. You are expanding your family. This is a momentous day. You're literally the goddess incarnate. So how can you how can you create that experience for yourself so when you do enter the birthing room, wherever that is, whether it's at home or somewhere else, that you are really surrounded by pleasure. And if you think of it that way, then there's really no way you can go wrong, because you're elevating your experience, right? Once you start to bring pleasure into the birthing room, pleasure tools, whether it's for yourself or your partner giving it to you or your doula giving it to you, you're elevating your experience no matter what. It's not about the outcome. It's not about like some kind of expectation or standard or adding, anything like that for women to achieve. It's really about seeing this experience for what it is, a part of a woman's sexuality, and what an incredible and momentous day it is, and really elevating your experience through it all. That was a lot. I hope that was helpful. Oh, my dear, there's no sound. I can't hear you. Hear you now.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. You would have seen me waving really emphatically with no sound. Anyway, I was just saying, Sheila, that is awesome. That's fantastic. How does a mum or a birthing parent who has found out about the possibility for ecstatic birth, and they're doing the preparation, they're doing, the work to uncover in their body, how to get in touch with those pleasurable sensations and heighten them. How do they then go and navigate, their birth choices and make the decisions that they need to make out in the kind of real world?
Yeah. That's such a good question, because I know it can feel very overwhelming. Like, you have so many choices. There's so much to navigate. And this goes back to the idea that there's no right way, right? Like, there's no right way and wrong way. So when you educate yourself, when you learn what you need to learn, when you know what your options are, when you know what, like, you've got all that heady stuff down, right? Then your task is to decide what's the right way for you. And the best way to do that is actually to drop into your body and let your feeling space navigate. So, for example, if you're choosing between two doulas, right? One might have all the credentials and, all the experience, but when you're in her presence, you don't feel so comfortable. Whereas another one might not have all the experience, but when you're in her presence, you feel like relaxed and open, right? So when you're looking at these two women, it might make more sense to go with the one that has the experience and the credentials and all that. But actually, what feels better is to go with the one that helps your body feel better, right? And you can do this with every decision, like learning to really drop into your body, and instead of following what makes more sense, which is like a mental, rational decision, start to follow what feels better each step of the way. Does it feel better to be at home? For some women, absolutely. And for other women, even if they know like the relative statistics, being at home feels scary. And if that's what it feels like to you, and you feel safer in a birthing center or in a hospital, that's where you go. So the main thing is, and this is such a powerful tool for motherhood too, right? Because you have to intuit for your baby all the time. So starting to really navigate all your choices and decisions from a feeling space as opposed to from like a thinking space.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful, isn't it? The body just knows. Our head kind of can make up stories and justifications, but our bodies always know the truth. And that's kind of like the power of, intuition. But it's like that gut brain, isn't it? That brain in our gut and that brain in our heart, and they all kind of speak together, and they're so connected to what's outside in the world, whereas our head can kind of go around in circles and circles and go past and, everything.
Yeah. And there are so many levels of wisdom in your body. I mean, there's your experiential wisdom, all the experiences you've had your whole life. Those are stored in your tissues, right? There's your primal wisdom, that like blueprint that exists within you. There's your ancestral wisdom. So there's so much wisdom in your body, as well as it does integrate your mental, rational wisdom. So it's really, that place is coming from full alignment with what is right for you on your path.
Yeah, and what is right for you on your path may look totally different to someone else, because you've got different different dharmas, like different paths that you're meant to be walking, and different stories that you're meant to bring into this planet to share, different learnings. Yeah. Beautiful. Now, so we know now that ecstatic birth is possible, but what if a woman, a birthing parent, wants to set out to have one? Is there anything, and they do all the work, but is there anything that can like block them? And what if they don't experience it? Like then what happens?
Yeah.
Like if they have this aim and it doesn't happen for them.
Yeah. And I want to say that that's very common, because there are so many things that are like right now in the birthing world, like kind of blocking that kind of experience. So I just want to like lay some of them out for you so that you have a sense of like how to navigate the different pieces for yourself. And then I'll talk about, you know, how you can look at it in a way, if it doesn't happen for you, in a way that can still take you higher and still feel, you know, strong and empowering. So first of all, like if you think back to what is our cultural legacy around birth, what's our religious story that we have around birth? It's that story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? And that Eve takes a bite of that apple, and, you know, God says, you know, women forever shall suffer in birth. Now, whether that's an accurate translation, whether that actually happened, whatever religion you believe in, it doesn't matter. That's our mythology, that's our cultural heritage, and that's ingrained in everything that you see around us. So I just like to share that up front, because sometimes women don't understand like how deep the roots go, that like this idea that we're supposed to suffer in childbirth. They go really, really deep. So then there's this other piece about like sexuality that we started talking about, right? Sexuality lives in the shadows a lot right now in our culture. We are just beginning to reclaim the idea that our sexuality is sacred, right? And so your relationship with your body, your sexual history, how you feel about your sexuality, is going to affect how you birth. And you know, unfortunately, the statistics do show that if you've had sexual trauma in the past, that it does make it harder for you to birth if that has not been cleared yet. So just really looking at like your relationship with sexuality in general, and also your personal experiences with sexuality. So that's another piece. And then there's the medical industry. The medical industry approaches birth as an emergency waiting to happen, which, you know, for the emergencies that do happen, like that's life-saving and that's wonderful, but it's not really seen as a normal physiological process in most birthing institutions. So you're working against this idea that a woman needs to be rescued in birth. And a lot of our medical systems, I know that this is a global conference, and I know that there are people coming from all around the world and listening, but you know, you need to understand where you are and the context of birth in terms of your medical systems. And in most places, it's highly medicalized. There is no trust in the woman's body. And a lot of our procedures and policies that relate to women are actually interventions that disrupt the normal physiological process of birth. So these are, you know, just some of the many levels in which they're disruptors. They prevent you from feeling that ecstasy. And then there's just this feeling of fear, right? How many women going into the birthing room have so much fear, which, you know, it makes sense if you're a first-time mom. Like, who doesn't have fear going into a new experience? But you have to really look at like, well, what is dominating your experience? Like, is your experience being run by fear? Because fear is a constricted state in the body. And when you're constricted, you're constricting blood flow, you're constricting energy flow. So if that's the dominant emotion in your birthing body, your process is being disrupted at the most basic level. Everything, your body has to work so much harder for that flow, for that opening. And then that kicks up like intensity, which can kick up more fear. And so all of this to say, like, it's not actually that easy right now at this moment in time to have an ecstatic birth experience, but it is wholly possible. You just have to train, you have to prepare, like you really, and you need the support. You need people that can hold that vision for you as you're preparing. You need people that are there in the birthing room that can hold that vision for you, that believe in you. So just to make sure that you have that for yourself. Now, does everybody that like trains with their whole heart, body, mind, and soul for an ecstatic birth have that kind of experience? No. So what do you do? Like if you really, really wanted that experience and you didn't have that experience, so how do you process that? One of the things we talk about in a lot of the ecstatic birth programs is this rhythm of like expansion and contraction, right? That governs labor. And part of becoming a mom, like in every birth, there are actually two births. There's the birth of the baby and there's the birth of the mother, right? So there's the physical process of labor that's happening, but there's also this process that's happening to you as a woman where you are rebirthing as a mother. And a lot of women will hit contracted moments on that journey to motherhood. For some, it's like fertility issues. They have a hard time getting pregnant. They have to go through a whole journey where they can reclaim their connection to their body and their fertility in that way. Some women have contracted moments in their pregnancies, right? Some women will have contracted moments in their labor and delivery. So the best way to understand this, you know, we live in a society that believes contractions are bad. Let's avoid contractions. Let's numb contractions. Let's, you know, actually, if you look at labor, contractions are the work your body has to do in order to expand, to open, to make you who you need to become to birth your baby. So when women don't have like the birth that they wanted, when they feel contracted about the experience that they wanted, it's really helpful to look at that as a contraction on your journey to motherhood. And in the contractions, there's always gold. You might not see it right after your birth, but there are always gifts for you. And, you know, anyone that's ever had an experience in life that was really difficult, but looking back, you're so grateful for it. I would encourage you to just kind of hold space for that. I will tell you, after I had my traumatic birth experience, I was a mess for a while. It took me a while to figure out like what those gifts were. But right now I can say to you, I wouldn't be who I am today without that experience. That experience made me into who I am today. It was a contracted moment on my journey, but that contraction was setting me up for my next expansion. So that's, you know, that's one way to frame it. That's one way to look at it. And then the other thing I want to say is I find that women are super hard on themselves. Like I find that women can often have fantastic births and, you know, kind of be like, woe is me, but there was that one moment that I didn't think I could do it and it was really intense. And everybody has that moment. And rather than focusing on like the things that, you know, maybe you feel not so great about, like, why don't you focus on the things that you do feel great about? And a lot of times with my private clients, I insist on holding a postpartum session because I find that just the experience of birthing and landing in motherhood can be so intense that sometimes like this perfectionist mentality takes over and pulls women down. And it's really nice to like go through a birth and highlight all the things to celebrate, all the things that went right, all the things that like, you know, you're really proud of. And I have to say, a lot of my mamas, even the ones that have had emergency C-sections, can still claim that birth is ecstatic for this reason.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so much in there. It's fabulous. It reminds me actually, you know, of the connectedness we used to feel to the seasons and that honoring of the seasons and the change in the seasons, you know, and we live on this beautiful planet Earth, which is on a little bit of a tilt. It's not perfect. It's on a tilt. And because of that tilt, we have winter and summer, and if we just see those contractions, I had this beautiful vision of, you know, contractions are basically like the winter, you know, it's like the goddess going underground for those 6 months and then coming up for summer and down again. And yeah, if we just honor those seasons within ourselves and know that, you know, it's because of that time of rest and recuperation in winter and it seems like nothing is happening, and then we could just burst forth in the spring and the summer and bloom, and very beautiful.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in the birthing process that we can pull out and bring into our own lives as well.
Yes. Do you want to talk about some of the practices that you have found worked for you and that you share like with your communities about how to actually get in touch with pleasure? Because it, you know, it really comes to mind that, and this is sort of what you've been talking about, you know, Adam, Eve, sexuality. We've repressed that we can feel sexual anytime. Like we've gone and compartmentalized it and said we're allowed to feel sexual at this point in time when we're in the bedroom, probably with a particular sort of partner at a particular time of day, you know, all that sort of stuff. We've got all these labels on it, but women, we can feel sexual anytime. Do you want to talk about just getting in touch with our pleasure and practicing pleasure?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing is there are so many practices. And, you know, sometimes like one practice will work really well for one woman and not so well for another woman. And it's like really finding the things that feel like really good and juicy to you. The number one thing that I have all my women do, all my mamas, all my practitioners, is start to connect to sensation. Right? Because we live mostly in our heads, like all of our energy is in our heads. Our bodies are kind of, you know, this thing that we use to move our head from place to place. And, you know, we will avoid going to the bathroom because we're too busy, or like, I'm not going to eat now because I have more important things to do. And so those are just all examples of how we are trained to ignore sensation in the body, right? And these are all examples that I think we can all agree we've been there. So, so the first thing it would just be like just to connect to sensation, like a very simple practice where you close your eyes and you just notice like what sensations are going on in your body. And, you know, a lot of women at first like won't really notice that much, but doing that on a regular basis and starting to journal what they're feeling in their body, it really starts to heighten things. The more you connect to sensation, since sensation is the language of the body, right? So when we talk about like intuition, inner wisdom, like all those things, like sensation is how the body talks to you. So the more you learn to connect to sensation, not only do you feel more as you're, you know, moving through life, but you're also getting access to that like deeper wisdom, that deeper guidance that we were talking about before. So what happens when you connect to sensation? You step outside and there's a breeze, and you might not have noticed that breeze, you know, before doing these practices. And you step outside, the breeze becomes a highly sensual experience for you, because when you're connected to sensation, you feel it on your skin, you feel it in your hair, you feel it, right? So that is the most basic and the most simple practice. Just lie down, close your eyes, and just connect to your toes. What does it feel like inside your toes? Connect to your leg, and slowly just reconnect to every part of your body. So that's the basis of everything I do. Everything I do is like somatic, sensation-based. But then there are things like I was saying to you before, like vocalizing. Vocalizing is such a wonderful way to get in touch with your pleasure. Now, most people probably aren't going to be walking down the street and like moaning, but you know, like if you've ever had like yummy food, like, you know that heightens the pleasure in your body. Breath is one of my favorites because breath is super stealthy, and breath you could bring into really any environment to heighten your turn on, to access your flow, and people don't really know what you're doing. So when you learn breathing practices, you can bring that to like, you know, your drive around the suburbs. I do that all the time. It's like stand at a red light and do some breath work and access the turn on. So there's just so much available. And I would say start playing with some practices and see what works for you. Be curious about what gives you that sense of flow, that gives you that sense of turn on and connection to your body. But at the root of it all is you need to learn how to feel. You need to learn to connect to the sensations in your body.
It's amazing, isn't it? And it's so simple. I mean, we're not talking about complicated things here. We're talking about body, sensation, breath, sound. I think we can all access that. What happens though if a woman, or you know, someone who wants to go down this path of accessing their pleasure, and they go, okay, I'm doing this, but when they start to access this pleasure, you know, those internal fears and blocks and things come up. Maybe they start to feel a bit of panic, old issues come up for them. How can they keep focused on the pleasure and you know, just let it heal things? Like what can they do?
I think you bring up such a good point, which is that pleasure is actually energy work, right? So learning to feel more pleasure in the body is you're basically learning how to allow more flow in your body. And by flow, I mean energy flow. And with any energy work, sometimes it'll bring stuff up, right? Because your body has a certain way of how it runs its energy. So once you start incorporating these practices, it could disrupt it.
You feel, not just by feeling pleasure, like, because we're talking about feeling more, we might suddenly be feeling more of everything. And then that's what I'm talking about. How can you just allow yourself to feel everything and then keep connected to the pleasure even through that? Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah. I mean, you will feel more of everything. And I think the way is just to be gentle with yourself. Like, just move as, one of my teachers, Sheila, who's a wonderful sexual educator, she has a phrase that says, move as fast as the slowest part of yourself, right? So to really just honor that, like, this is not about getting to a certain destination. Although if you're pregnant, you do have sort of like a timeline. So then we can talk about like more effective tools. But in general, this process of like opening to more and more pleasure, it's really an endless process. Like you can always open to more. There's always more flow. There's always more to be felt, right? So to really honor your own pace and move at a pace that feels good to you. So as stuff comes up, you can integrate, you can acclimate. And if you do have experiences in your past that, might feel traumatic or might have been, really kind of gnarly, difficult to resolve, the best way is just to get support, right? To have somebody like hold space for you in that way. But, if you're just talking about like, how do you handle like the expansion and feeling, I would say, use Sheila's wisdom and move as fast as the slowest part of you.
And that really brings us back to honoring the contraction, honoring the winter as well.
Yeah. With contractions, like I was saying before, is you want to avoid it, but it's not, the more you resist a contraction, this is the wisdom of birth, right? The more you resist a contraction in labor, the more work your body has to do. So it kicks up the intensity. So the resistance is it's very counterproductive, actually.
It's so interesting. So it's like, it's not almost about like, it's like this balance between, yes, suddenly this light bulb goes on. I can feel pleasure. I want to feel pleasure. I'm going to learn how, but at the same time, it's balanced by this willingness to feel, the rush of the contraction as well. It's like, and then letting hopefully the pleasure overtake that. But because you have that willingness, then it's beautiful.
I just started laughing because I was thinking about, a lot of times people will say to me like, can I have an ecstatic birth even if I have an epidural? I'll be like, yeah, sure. But, if you're going to numb sensation, you're going to numb the entire spectrum, right? So if you're going to numb sensation, you can still have like a happy, birth as long as you understand what you're doing in terms of risks and all that. But like, you're going to numb sensation. So when you're numbing one end, you're numbing the other too. It goes both ways, right?
Yes. And that actually brings up for me, like I saw recently this thread. It's actually a beautiful thread, just someone going in Facebook, look, I'm having my third baby, I'm probably doing an epidural this time for these reasons. Can people talk me through it and tell me it's okay? And literally hundreds of women replied going, yes, I had an epidural. It was the best thing in my life. And I have a lot of respect for that, because it's that, because I had natural births and that's what I really wanted to do. But I have a lot of respect for going, I chose epidural because I didn't want to feel the pain, and guess what? I didn't. And it was brilliant because of that. And if that was the path that worked for them in terms of reconnecting to their sense of pleasure and what was pleasurable for them and honoring them and their body, then, go for it. At the same time, I guess if you want to walk that there's this book, Chasm of Fire, and she talks about this tightrope, and how there's like this pit of fire underneath, and it's a beautiful book about her meeting her spiritual master and, going on that path with him. But anyway, if you want to walk that tightrope of fire, I guess, and experience, that extreme bliss and ecstasy, not just no pain, which is beautiful, but actual, like, what are the total possibilities of pleasure and ecstasy, then that sort of takes a great deal of determination and bravery. Yeah.
It does. And that's why it goes right back to, you know, what's the right birth for you? I can't tell you that.
Do you want to share with us any more of your tools that you have, or I think you mentioned just a moment ago that there were certain tools that for birthing women, like actually in the birth?
Oh, well, you know, the easiest way. So if I have a woman coming to me in her third trimester, the easiest way is there's two ways you can access pleasure, right? So one is like you can learn to connect to sensation. You can learn to feel in your body, right? So you can access pleasure from within yourself. However, the easiest way to integrate pleasure is just to give yourself pleasure, right? Like just to give yourself pleasure from the outside, not have to do all this training to access it from within. So, you know, anything that makes you feel good, like really think about your senses. Like, what do you want to see? What do you want to hear? What do you want to feel? Giving yourself the physical experience of pleasure, like your partner, that's a wonderful tool for partners. A lot of partners want to know how they can support. So giving yourself the experience of pleasure in birth is really, really powerful, whether that's overtly sexual or it's something more comforting like a cozy blanket or, you know, wearing something. But really, you're limited only by your creativity. Like you can decorate, you can bring things in. It's like, you know, a lot of people like to talk about birth like running a marathon or climbing a mountain, right? Like these big athletic feats, and it is an athletic feat. And if you think about, you know, running a marathon or climbing a mountain, it's like you're going to bring stuff along to sustain you, right? You're going to bring stuff along. You're going to bring snacks. You might have music. You might have, like, you're going to bring stuff along to kind of keep you juiced and keep you, and that like marathon or that mountain climb doesn't mean like every step you take is going to feel great, but you're going to have stuff for when you're in those like gnarly moments that feel tight to sustain yourself. So it doesn't have to be all that complicated. Like I really want to share that, like, even if you're a week away from your due date and your baby's right around the corner and you think, oh, I don't have time for all of this, you know, all of these body practices, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You know, I have women that will stroke their clitorises with every contraction. Again, like you have to be in the right space for that, but that's accessible to everyone, like right away. And what that does, it starts to transmute the intensity of sensation from the realm of pain into the realm of pleasure, while giving you a nice dose of oxytocin, while supporting the engorgement of your tissues. And when your tissues are engorged, guess what? They're much more pliable. They can open wide, you know, without that feeling of like intense burning and stretching, you know. It's so it doesn't have to be hard is what I'm saying. Just think about like what gives you pleasure, what experiences, how can you be like super decadent in terms of what experiences you bring into the birthing room.
You know, I read in a book probably, and I probably had my doula say this to me as well in my other births, sex during labor. Is it possible? Does it work? Do people do it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it totally works. Again, it's like, well, does that feel right to you? You know, like I'll say for you, my third birth, I thought it was going to be this sensual sexual experience. It wasn't. But I had like this dancing, my body in that moment did not want the water. I had a water birth all set up just in case I wanted water. Did not want water. Did not want my husband anywhere near me. It just wanted to move and do its thing. And that took me so high. So yes, like you can plan and plan and plan, but you're not going to know what your body wants until that moment. That said, sex is a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful tool to help you, again, like move into the realm of pleasure, to bring oxytocin flow into the birth. It's not going to be for everyone. You know, some people are going to love that, and some people are going to, I don't want anything to do with that. And even if you think you might love it, you don't know until you're in the moment. That's why it's good to have lots of different options to draw upon.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Wow. All right. Well, thank you for all this. How can women come and follow you, and how can they take courses with you, Sheila?
Thank you, sweetheart. So my website is ecstatic-birth.com, and you can, if you sign up for my newsletter, you get the you know, like the 4 essential keys. I'm also offering to women in this summit, I have a free 10-day email course called the Ecstatic Mama's Guide to Ecstatic Birth. Every day you get information, tools, practices relating to how you can prepare for your ecstatic birth, different things you need to think about. And yeah, I've got a lot of programs. The most accessible and the most in line with what we've been talking about is a program called Oh Baby, which is a 5-day, like you get 5 seminars in 5 days. And we do all these body practices that we've been talking about. We do the breath, the sound, the movement, the sensation practice. And it's just like a really fun way to prepare for your labor and delivery with pleasure. So all of this, I'm sure you're going to put links and send stuff out. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so much fun. Oh my God. Sounds like an incredible experience. I love the idea of the seminars, and I love the idea that it's focused on fun and pleasure and getting in touch with our bodies. And I probably anyone can do it. Yeah, like birth support people can do it, as well as you don't have to be, expecting to do it.
No,
do you? Everyone?
Everyone can do it. Oh Baby is, it's geared towards expectant moms, but when I run trainings for practitioners, I have them do all the exercises, because if you're going to share this with moms, it's better if you understand, if you can embody it, if you can hold it. And also for birth practitioners, if there's anyone watching that's a birth practitioner, could you imagine if you're in the birthing room and you can hold that tone for pleasure in your own body, right? Like the birthing field is so contagious. So if you can tap into that oxytocin flow for yourself as you're supporting another, first of all, it nourishes you. Your work could be hours and hours in supporting another woman. It nourishes you so you don't get so drained, but also you're bringing that tone into the birthing room. So I encourage, birth practitioners to really take this journey for themselves as well and learn to feel more pleasure, expand their pleasure, and bring it into the birthing space.
It sounds incredible. And actually, it really does open up the question of, in the future, what will the role and roles of birthing support workers be? I mean, it's there about being with women and this moment of love and birth and beauty. But how can, birth workers expand their idea of their role to be there actually as someone supporting states of bliss? It's mind-blowing and phenomenal how things could possibly change. Future.
I think it's really similar to the role of mothers. Like I think of birth professionals as mothering the mothers, right? And so I think like globally moms are a bit depleted, right? Like mamas need some love. And I think birthing professionals in the same way need some love and nourishment. And I think there's no better way than connecting to your body and your pleasure and being able to source from that place.
Delicious. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sheila. We're going to share this talk out into the beautiful wide world and hope that it impacts on so many people's lives in a beautiful way as part of this summit. And we're definitely reaching the end of the summit now. I guess I have a question for you, just a very open question, because we're all talking here about being open and engorged anyway. So let's just go there. But how would the world change? Like if womankind and maybe everyone just knew that they could access these states of pleasure and know that that was their birthright and know that that was okay. Like how would the world change? How do you see the vision for the future once people connect to how sexual sensuality and feeling sexual isn't shameful, and that something as terrible and scary as birth can actually maybe be the most blissful experience of their whole life? What's going to happen?
I think that's a really big question. And if you take it just to mom and baby, like at the level of the mom and baby, right? If a mom can walk away from her birth experience feeling like vibrant, strong, empowered, right? As opposed to like depleted, traumatized, needing to heal, fill in the blank. If a mom can enter motherhood like with that vibrancy, with that potency from having had this like blissful, transcendent experience where she felt really connected to all that is. I mean, right there, that's the sacred, that's the sexual, that's the spiritual. So imagine having had a mom that had that embodied within her? What would your childhood have looked like, right? So one of the things I love, I can't remember wwho asked this, but I remember being at a conference and somebody said, well, you know, how would your life have been different if your mom was more joyful? Right? So we can all kind of feel that. We can feel that instant elevation. And then from the perspective of the baby, of like, you know, coming into the world through pleasure, rather than through pain, having that be the imprint, having that, I feel like it's such a powerful, it has so much potential to, you know, like, I don't mean to sound corny, but like world peace, harmony, like that's the vision that comes to mind. To, if you can change the imprint in this moment from one of pain, trauma, victimization, you know, just going back to that story of Eve, it's like, well, what else does that story tell us? That story tells us that female desire is shameful, that woman is going to be punished for her desire, right? And that the divine is choosing this moment when the next generation is coming forth to say shame on you to the woman, right? Which is, it's like, really? Like, that's the moment at which the divine is punishing woman for her desire? Like, I just feel like this moment of birth could change everything.
Absolutely. And it's what you've said, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you punish the next generation? Doesn't make any sense. And it's like the biggest gift almost we can give our children is to give ourselves pleasure. Amazing.
Yes. Moms, the biggest gift you can give your children is to take care of your own joy, rather than this idea that self-sacrificing and depletion and sacrifice doesn't really serve anybody.
No. Oh my God, I'm going to cry. So I'll just say so fucking beautiful. I think this is the first time I've sworn through the whole series, but I'm going to do it now. Fucking beautiful. Beautiful.
Wow. I love, thank you so much for bringing awareness. Thank you for this beautiful series. Thank you for gathering so many like leaders, visionaries, having these conversations. It's so important to get the word out there. It's so important to wake people up, to activate them. So thank you for your role in that.
It is. And thank you, Sheila, for acknowledging and realizing that. And also in that acknowledging and realizing all the beautiful, beautiful people who've come together to speak and share and dream and make this a reality. So it's there as a resource for people to connect to when they're ready for it and wanting it and wanting that pleasure. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us, Learning to Birth. Again, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Learn to Birth. And you can follow Sheila at Ecstatic Birth. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much every social media, like the handle is at Ecstatic Birth.
Oh, good. All right. And we'll get that link down below for you to join her course over the next few days. And up into the future, just go to her website, ecstatic-birth.com. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
So thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.